Hello and welcome to Newsclick. This program in partnership with Real News. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is making his fourth visit to the United States, and there are varied expectations from the American side and from the Indian side as to what this visit means and what likely outcomes are. But in today's program, we want to focus on discussions related to security and defense. And to help us with these discussions, we have with us today former Commander Atul Bhardwaj, now with the Institute of Chinese Studies in Delhi. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. And as you've already said, that this is Modi's fourth visit now in almost 2 years' time. And so obviously, even if when he is not going on bilateral visits to the United States and going in for multilateral visits for events, there is always a bilateral element involved in whenever he visits Washington, for that matter. There's always business involved in his visits over there. So in that respect, I see this as a very crucial visit. One, because Obama is now about to leave in another 8 months' time, and during his entire 8-year tenure, basically, this relationship has really fructified. And I believe that this relationship is, regardless of whichever government is there in whichever country, this relationship has been moving on and gaining strength for the last 20 odd years now. And you see that, it has been persistently following a particular line. Only thing is, it has been accelerated and deaccelerated from time to time. After Modi came back, he's actually put his foot on the accelerator, and he doesn't know when to stop.
But the speed at which it is going reflects in what, in terms of outcome, that you think is going to be pursued in this visit. From what the Indian ambassador to the United States is saying, he has been saying that he is viewing this as a kind of a transitional visit leading into the next administration.
The Americans are good at manufacturing events. Modi is very good at event management, as they say. So they are looking for a big ticket event actually to define the Indo-American relations. After the 2005 123 agreement, they haven't had any big ticket event to redefine the relationship or to resell the relationship to the people. So now what they are going to do is they are going to find that event, I think, is not going to be LSA, or that is the logistic support agreement, the signing of the logistic support agreement, which is a little more complicated.
You don't think that's going to happen in this visit?
It may not happen. It will eventually happen, but that may not happen in this particular visit. And even if it will eventually happen, but it will not be showcased as a big ticket event, because that does not really help the relationship in that sense, both domestically, especially in India. So the big ticket event, what is going to be that big ticket event? I feel that big ticket event is going to be the US-India collaboration on nuclear powered aircraft carrier. The US has already agreed to supply the landing equipment, the more modern landing equipment for that particular purpose. About the propulsion machinery on that issue, there are still negotiations going on both within the US Congress as well as India would definitely want it if it is given.
Although so far there has been no announcement even of an in principle deal with regard to nuclear propelled aircraft carrier, you think that it is likely that during this visit some such in principle agreement would be announced?
No, I am not saying that there would be in principle on propulsion, no agreement would come in now. But on the collaboration part in other fields, suppose there are other weapon systems which may go into that, even that we may not have an agreement on. But in principle, they may agree on, say, because this aircraft carrier would be 65,000 ton aircraft carrier, on which they could probably have 50 F-35 aircrafts. Now, these fifth generation F-35 aircrafts are actually, the US is not able to really sell them because there are a lot of doubts about this particular aircraft, about the efficacy of this aircraft itself. And of course, it's very, very expensive. Even the Economist had actually given an article on this particular issue, that this aircraft is not worth its salt actually.
So given the uncertainties, seem to be getting into areas of more and more uncertainty with nuclear propulsion for the aircraft carrier and F-35s. So given all these uncertainties, maybe the best that could happen during this visit is some kind of a preparatory or exploratory agreement along those lines.
Yes, we do expect. The basic fact is that the Americans are now actually getting India into, the buzzword of the entire strategic arrangement is interoperability. Yeah. Now, interoperability basically comes from the fact that the Americans are now designing the networks enabled architecture of warfare. Now, in that network enabled architecture, basically the equipment which will work will be, and which will ensure interoperability between units, between forces, that is between units within a force, and between forces, and also between countries. So, there the equipment which will actually now be sold is which is capable of plug and play. So, if you have an equipment which can plug and play into an American designed network architecture, that is the equipment which will work, and that is the equipment which America wants to sell to India.
I'd like to come back to the hardware part a little bit later, but meanwhile, do you think one of the subjects under discussion is likely to be closer cooperation between India and the United States in terms of patrolling or otherwise joint operations in the South China Seas?
China, of course, they have to find a raison d'etre basically to sell the equipment or to get closer to each other, and China, of course, offers the best raison d'etre for that. I do not understand how India could possibly take a position on South China Sea issue. It's a dispute between various countries involved in the area. One country has there are claims and there are counter claims. If you see the Indian, strategic community on that, their take on that particular issue, it's a very one-sided thing. They would actually talk in terms of the claims which are put forth by Japan, or for that matter Vietnam or Philippines. Now, the claims that the Chinese are putting up, nobody discusses that. So, based on one-sided claims, we have actually formulated that South China Sea is a problematic area. South China Sea is much less problematic in comparison to what has happened in the Middle East.
United States today is taking the position that the South China Seas are open international waters, that there should be freedom of passage there, and this is what they are slowly trying in one way or another to try and enforce by sending in American vessels into the South China Sea in areas which the Chinese are increasingly regarding as their own. Is it likely that some form of statement or otherwise which projects joint US-India interests in protecting the international characters of waters around the South China Sea, some such formulation is likely to come forward?
There is no threat to freedom of navigation as such. There are ships which are allowed to go. In your territorial waters, no country allows you to have your warships coming in without permission. That is a very clear-cut clause in that sense.
Yeah, but China today has declared those as its territorial waters, which was not there a few years ago. And that's the basis of the American position, that these are open waters.
But the fact is that, I'm not actually, saying what China is doing or what China is not doing. I'm basically saying, you travel miles into another area, basically. Who is actually triggering the conflict?
No, that's fine. I'm asking, therefore, not who is right or who is wrong.
That's exactly.
But do you think that there is a likelihood of India getting dragged into the American position on the South China Sea?
India has already got dragged into that. We've already been doing this Malabar series of exercises with Americans, in which again Japanese are also coming in which again Australians are also coming in. It's a quadrilateral kind of an arrangement which we are getting into in South China Sea. It is primarily to apply pressure on China. The entire game is to apply, America's pivot to Asia is primarily designed to counter China.
Coming back to the Modi visit, if nothing concrete is going to emerge on any of these other big ticket items, as you said, there has been some speculation that the US is poised and that the Modi government is also poised to do some medium ticket, shall we say, technology transfer ideas under the Make in India program based around the FA-18 or the F-16.
No, ever since this contract was up for sale, Americans have been trying to gain a backdoor entry into this, because the aircraft they pitched in initially was F-16. Now, the world knows that F-16 is now almost reaching its level of redundancy. It is no longer, Indians would have rejected it. Indians rejected it actually outrightly. Then they said, okay, if you don't want F-16, then we'll probably pitch in with F-35s, which are the 5th generation aircraft. Now, India is already in tie-up with Russia to produce a 5th generation aircraft. Now, how does that come into the picture? But that 5th generation, there is, as I said initially, there is no naval version of that 5th generation aircraft that India is building with the Russians. So, this aircraft carrier, nuclear powered aircraft carrier that can carry 50 aircrafts comes into picture. And that is how the whole game of selling F-35s, of selling E-2C Hawkeyes and building India into an interoperable network enabled warfare, which is actually controlled by the United States.
Your final word on what else do you think is likely to be the outcome of the Obama-Modi meetings during the Modi visit?
The likely outcome is that the entire, this whole edifice of India-US relations is based on military. This is going to get strengthened further. The work on LSA is going to get enhanced. So, LSA basically again is business. Majority of the US military logistics, all military logistics is actually privatized now. So, when you are actually signing a logistic agreement with the United States, you are actually giving entry to these private military.
Bunch of US contractors.
They are not contractors, but they are now actually corporatized private military
That's
companies.
Right. Yeah.
So, how that is going to impact on your military, no study has been carried out before getting into this agreement on this particular issue. How your military is going to get transformed, no study has been carried out on that particular issue. So, it's a very half-baked approach towards even military diplomacy, I would say.
So, to use a naval analogy, could I say that India and the US, the way they are going now, seems to be entering choppy waters?
They are not entering choppy waters. In fact, they are entering, they are getting into a cruising stations in terms of moving on in the military field. The choppy waters actually you see is on the soft power issues. If you see a lot of cooperation and convergence on the hard power issues, which is the military issues, you see a divergence and discord in terms of the soft power issues. You have seen that the US is condemning India's religious freedom in India. It's condemning the Indians' human rights records. India, on the other hand, is acting on the United States civil rights groups which are operating in India, or their advocacy of civil rights in India. So, this game is being played out, but this divergence and discord is what Modi requires, because if this divergence and discord is not existing, if this does not seem to be there, then Modi does not look that nationalistic, because this entire game which is being played on the hardware plane is actually, or the hard power plane is actually detrimental to India's interest in the long run. It is making basically India more dependent. So, if Modi was to sell this kind of a thing,
it's difficult for him.
It's difficult for him. So, he has to show to show that he is equal to the United States. These kinds of discords help.
Thank you very much, Commander Bhardwaj.
Thank you so much.